Доброе утро.
Good morning. Let us begin our panel session, The State as a Platform, People and Technologies. My name is Alexey Komissarov, and I'm going to moderate this meeting of ours today. The idea of state as a platform turned up during brainstorms of the Center of Strategic Developments in autumn 2016, and in 2017 it was presented publicly for the first time. And a year ago, here in the Academy at the Gaidar Forum, we had a discussion under the same title, The State as a Platform. And last year, a national program of digital economy turned up in state, in public authorities, with the heads of digital transformation there. And it looks like we are actively moving ahead. But still many matters are yet unsettled. Mainly those connected with managing data and policies connected with data, and most importantly, whether we are heading ahead in the right way actively, or should we somehow amend this direction. I hope that we are going to discuss these and other matters during our discussion today. And our speakers, our experts that I'm going to introduce to you now, I believe will share their viewpoint on this. So please meet Maxim Akimov, Deputy Prime Minister of the Russian Federation, German Gref, President and Chair of the Board Sberbank, Amr Salem, Vice President of Global Public Sector of Cisco, Alexei Barlenovsky, President of MasterCard Participators Association in Russia. And our first row panelists are Maxim Parshin, Deputy Minister of Digital Development, Communications and Mass Media of the Russian Federation, and Sava Shipov, Deputy Minister of Economic Development of the Russian Federation. And the keynote presentation that we're going to start with now will be given by Maria Shklaruk, who today is Scientific Director of a new program that was launched last year in the Higher School of Public Administration of Russian Academy of National Economy and Public Administration. And after the presentation, we will discuss it. Thank you very much, and thank you for launching the PowerPoint. I hope it will stay with us. So I would like to focus on the experience of our program that we ran last autumn, and I would like to thank Mr. Akimov that initiated this program, and Sberbank that supported us a lot in a situation when we had a month or a month and a half to get together the whole program and run 3 large flows with federal ministers and regional authorities and subordinate organizations in the regions that so far deal with IT solutions. And the first challenge that we faced was that digitalization as an idea is changing. And a lot of our participants said that, we had lived through innovations, automation, and we will live through it as well. And that is a huge challenge for the whole system of state governance and digital economy program, when many people think that they will just stay as they are, and they will simply live through it, and it will go away. And everybody keeps repeating that when IT solutions are introduced, they are based on outdated and obsolete software and hardware, and it is difficult to change the mindset for re-engineering when IT is next to all the programs. And that is embedded in different areas of digital economy, and that can be transmitted through trainings, and we discuss that with our students. But now the world is already in the third or a totally new stage when transformation takes place through platform solutions and through lowering transaction costs between two parties when the platform itself acts as an intermediary. If we talk about the state, a large question that we pose in our report, but we do not find an answer to it yet, and we hope to do so in 2019, and that is, what is a state where state authorities are losing the part of their activities when they act simply as an intermediary between organizations and data, or between people and data, when data are in tax inspectorates and other systems, and the state just gives us proof of this data. So what if we eliminate this function, if we gain access to the data that are located in uniform system? Then a huge part of the state activities will go online. And what will happen afterwards? When companies go to digital transformation, they start speaking about another stage, that is new products or new processes with a new quality, and sometimes with totally new product. What is that for social and state governance system? And it is really critical so far to speak about ethical issues that turn up. And last time we ran a lecture on ethics in digital era, and just start thinking. I believe that you are all very smart people, and come to think about railway car, and how can you program a vehicle when you have to make a choice whom you will run over. Developers will tell you, oh, we will give you this or that algorithm. And how will you solve a problem of the trolley? And ethically speaking, these tasks are settled differently in different countries. So that is an open question, how the government should act. And a year ago, like Alexei has mentioned, when we presented the state as a platform concept for the first time, we said that there were several layers of tech solutions that have to be the focus of this platform for state governance system. But that is narrow understanding. And now when we dig deeper, what do we see? We see that people are very concerned with data, and they say, let's work with data, we have a lot of data. But if you have a lot of bad data, it will not give you much. And I would like to thank Sberbank, who shared a frame with us, and we redeveloped it a little bit, but we work within this frame. There has to be an infrastructure that will suit all the modern tasks, and data have to be gathered, but data is a component of the process. If your processes are bad, you will have data that you will not understand and will not be able to interpret. On the other hand, you have to build processes in the government in such a way that data should be a component for decision-making. And people have to have competences and interaction culture that is drastically different from what we have now. Yes, there are some sources now, but so far there are very few of them, and that is not strong interaction. When we're talking about three key vectors of digital transformation in state governance system, we have to say that there has to be a single national data architecture, and so far it is not clear how we will implement that. We will have to change the system of state governance itself, and a lot of our listeners are representatives of IT authorities, vertical, and very often they say we have to change the system of public services, our processes, we have to change functions and everything. And that is a very critical moment, because now the digital drives development for whole state governance system that is not yet ready for that. And we're happy that Ministry of Economic Development and mass media actively cooperate and work together, but that is not that strong in the regions. And that has to happen in one information field with one understanding of what people have to do. Because when we ask a room of 100 people, do you understand the goal that you work for in digital economy and digital transformation, there are practically no hands raised. At the federal level, it is somewhat easier, but still, it is not yet a fact that all the goals are understood correctly. So it means that so far we have not agreed where to go exactly and what understanding that should be. The PowerPoint will be accessible and the report is now online, and we share some ideas saying that now to run digital transformation we need different people. There is a popular position talking about the head on data processing or chief digital transformation officer, and we also have to change management in organization. And here a big question is posed in terms of what competences we expect of these people, and that is just general managerial competences. People have to be able to manage a project, to manage changes. And there are not many people who are capable of that. But there are also additional expectations of CDTO. That is an ability to think on behalf of a person that you work from. And we do not have a developed idea of internal client. And it is really important because if you cannot apply it in your everyday life, it will be harder to apply it in relation to citizens. And very hard work is interaction between organizations. And another important moment connected with the competences is where should I click? So when I click through, here is a picture. So that is a high risk that we are talking to our colleagues about. What a person responsible for data can turn into. A secretary bird. Because, like now, the idea we have is data are stored somewhere, like in a wardrobe, and it can stay like that if work with mathematical methods does not develop. If any leader cannot read a regression table and understand it, and again, a regression table is just an example, but that means that it will be hard to work with data interpretation and model understanding, and understanding not a simple chart or table or spreadsheet, but understanding the essence of it. And we're going to discuss a lot about artificial intelligence today, and there are a lot of myths around AI. And when we show that it is simple maths that is within it, and we teach people to build simplest models, their attitude changes. But that takes a lot of time and dozens of hundreds of people. And these are the tasks and challenges of 2019 for us, to explain what is within the digital transformation and how to do it. And even 10,000 people is little in terms of general culture, because we need to change that culture, and that is the role of the leader, as this culture gains even more significance. And I would like to give you an example. We had one of the project teams with the General Prosecutor's Office representatives working with civil servants. And that is huge risks in digital transformation as well, that are in law enforcement agencies to civil servants, and public procurement sphere to civil servants again. And that enabled them all to have another look to digital transformation and to elaborate a single policy to manage all the legal risks that the government has. And people connected with public procurement and IT understands that. And that is a large impetus as well, because they think we will not do anything, as that implies large risks. And one of the key risks that and challenges that I would also like to mention is as follows. Here is a difference between pay of civil servants and IT experts of different levels. The question is how to overcome this, to work for different subcontractors all the time. No, that is not a way out. We need to overcome that. And some piece of advice that we have for 2019, yes, truly, we need to develop modern methods of development, project management, management of change. We need to support prototypes of future services in pilot regions, do it fast and roll it out fast as well. And we need to have a chief platform architect and correctly structure data management and ideas and solutions in state governance. And we also need to have such a legal base to public procurement that will enable us to have flexible development. What else is critical is when there are successful cases, we need to roll out not only technological solutions, but also show best practices of how culture changed and how people managed to do that. Because as a rule, there are several people in the room that worked in Agile and that can share that with other people. But most importantly, it's not about Agile, but when we talk about processes, a lot of civil servants believe that they know process management and they work in it. But what they call processes and how they understand processes has nothing to do with normal processes, and that is one of the difficulties that we need to overcome as well. And the last thing that I would like to mention, one of the key lectures that we give at our course is a lecture on Chinese experience. And after we speak about platforms in China, how they work, how they are structured, like Alibaba experience and so on, the idea that civil servants have, and they voice it, can we catch up with them? Can we still do something? And most importantly, it is not present in a digital economy program anywhere. And that is a challenge going back to the first slide. What exactly are we doing and what should we do now? Going to process solutions that will change whole industries and process management, or will we limit ourselves again by re-engineering of processes and some number of super services and a new number of civil services, and that will not transform state governance? Thank you very much.
Now we're going to discuss what you have been mentioning. We have a full audience today, so I'd like for all who are visiting today's discussion would be able to ask their questions and participate in our discussion. May we have the slide? We have the platform which is called When Speak. You should go to whenspeak.ru and put in the password 9759. You need to ask your own questions and vote for the questions which have already been voiced. The questions with the most amount of votes are going to be voiced to our speakers today. I'm going to ask a couple of questions. I will start with Maxim Alexievich. So 2 questions for right now. The first one is based on what Maria has mentioned already, that some people say that they have gone through the modernization, renovation, and they're going to go through the digital transformation. What is new? How is it different from the previous approaches, what we have been discussing right now? And the second question is, what are the main objectives for 2019 from your standpoint, which would allow us to successfully implement the digital state governance? Good morning to everyone. I believe, need to have this very unpleasant surgery, or continue to take off and look at the wonderful Earth from the very distant, brilliant future. I'd like to admit that we need to have this step down a little bit, to change our perspective a little bit, and to say that we have a deeper, and the problems are of an infant stage, which haven't been solved yet in 2019, luckily or unfortunately. With the help of the conventional tools, we will have to tackle these problems. Undoubtedly, we are doing that together, launching our program, which is not to teach people, but to change our mindset, to change the whole essence for the people's communication to be different. This is not a regular, conventional learning course. We're going to change ourselves to get ready for the novelty of the real world of data. Such a fundamental base, such a fundamental trait as the capability of key transformation system to work together, to have a harmonic architecture which would be described in a reasonable language, to design and stipulate the clear regime of data management and operation, including the legal framework, how the data should be managed in the state authorities, to provide for the technological capabilities for the development of the base platform. I personally imply the main highway of data, of electronic operation interagency level, and the system of authentication and identification, to design and develop a clear system of incentives which would promote those who are responsible for this work on this track. This is the objective of the base level. That might sound not very aspiring, but I'd like to say that in 2019 we will have to focus on key basic task solutions. One of the tasks has been voiced by Maria, this national system of data management, clarification of this network, of this skeleton, the basic organism of the life in this data-centric world. I'd like to mention again, for at least us to consider the key resources which are not systematically accessible right now, the huge fintech requests for data operation and management, which is on our field. We don't have a legal framework. We don't have the technological capabilities for right now. I'm not even talking about the access to private providers' services to these state platforms. So we don't have the technological and content capabilities. This is a light goal setting. By 2024, the world is going to change drastically. The dynamics and the pace of these changes implies that we're going to aim at what has been stipulated in the report. You know, I'm got used to reading the text very carefully and then to speak about the text. We need to change the leverage, the focus on the digital maturity of those services we are promoting is a little bit defractured. So the incentive of the ministries and agencies to change, to strive for the digital maturity is going down. And we have a full toolkit and incentive mandatory mechanisms are going to be launched by us. So as a first-tier objective, I would say to normalization and fine-tuning the basic key information resources. These tasks are clear. We don't have many of them. The owners are quite clear. The single passport database, this is the register of the population, the register of the legal entities. In terms of the interoperability, to provide algorithms for the public services provided by the private business. And second, the national system of data management. The third system is the system of incentives for the ministries and agencies from the perspective of the digital transformation and provision of the electronic packages in the form and in the order we're going to adopt by June. This is the main set of the objectives to teach our agencies and ministries. I'd like to apologize for bringing us down to the earth. But it seems very important for me. This process has a second side. The same should be done in the regions. If we are talking about the super services, now I'm mostly speaking G2C sector. There is G2B sector, and a huge one, G2G sector, which we haven't touched upon yet. This is the provision for data centricity for the processes which is happening interagency level. This is a separate, very huge question which has been voiced by Maria, but I'm focusing now on the first most vivid case where we have the technological and the design, these mature solutions to promote the services. Starting with basic information from registers provision, the register of non-capability and the services to restore the passport or to register the residency, ending with very sophisticated process connected with the identification of a child and all the features of the digital twin of the family in the digital world for the person to be able to do it from home. These are the basic objectives. If you look at the fast track for 2019, I don't have huge reprimands and remarks to what Maria has been saying, but without solving these basic objectives, from my perspective, they are underlying and fundamental. Such major objectives, so the breakthrough is impossible. We have a working group, including the biggest, the architecture for the data management and operation. It has clear goals. The first is the national system of data management. The second is the system of identification of the digital profile of a person and end-to-end identification process. Including the major state information system architects and the financial entities, including Sberbank employees. We have created such a platform which we managed to launch. That is all I wanted to say as of today, but the agenda of planning is not a theoretical. It's our day-to-day work together with the Minister of the Digital Development and the Minister of Economic Development and with all our partners in private and state sectors. Thank you very much. I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Gref. You have been the working head on the state governments when the concept emerged. We know that this issue is very close to you. What was derailed from your perspective in terms of the implementation of the whole case as it was expected. Do we have anything to change right now? To fix right now? Good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank Maria, who is a driver of this program. At the first stage of such a program, drive is very painful, and understanding the state as a platform sounds quite bizarre, but today this term is quite reasonable one, and the problem which has been voiced is quite vivid. The first one is we haven't defined the answer to the question what. We don't have the clear, understandable strategy. Overall, we have kind of a frame. We have a digital economy framework which was framed last year. If we take a look at this program at the end of 2020, this program is, first of all, I'm quite critical of the content of the program. This is the first point. Since we have become 1 year older, and the program is to be revised drastically. And the first question is the base story. This is the answer to the question which Mr. Akimov has voiced. This is a basic concept approach. It hasn't been defined yet. So that's why the movement forward is impossible. The second question is who. We have a big problem with this stuff. I would say that we have a huge problem with this stuff. The system of education hasn't transformed yet. The higher school is not ready to prepare the people we would like to see in the business. From my perspective, we need to focus considerably on the higher school, as all they are state-owned, and we require a huge impetus from this state to the rectors to get them out of the comfort zone, for them to turn their faces not to budget niche, not to the commercial niche, because, you know, the higher school is doing great. They have a huge number of people who would like to study. That's the cash flows are constant, and they feel quite well. And how to get them out of the comfort zone? Where the business is in the discomfort zone, feeling the lack of competitiveness, how to do it right, how to give the right impetus for the higher schools to prepare these specialists and this staff, to retrain huge number of specialists engaged in the national economy and this state governance is a huge question in front of us. Talking about figures, I can ask a question to the audience. Last year was the high boom in demand for technologies, mobile technologies, for instance, e-commerce in Russia. From mobile services surged to 57%. The e-commerce from tablets went down. The smartphones became the dominant factor. We see the surge in the voice assistant, so-called bots, communication enabled by them. About 47% of millennials don't want to talk to people. They want to speak to bots if they need the technical assistance. And they go to the call center. They prefer to text messages or the communication with the bots. Oh, that is a question. How many people are working on the voice assistants in Amazon, for instance? Alexa and Echo. Do you know the figure? 1,000. Any other ambition? 10,000. 12,000 people should work. 10,000 are working. 2,000 vacancies are still open. This is to compare, for example, Yandex staff headcount amounts to approximately 9 to 10,000. And the voice assistant in Amazon is almost the headcount of the most advanced Russian technological company. I'm not saying this is a tiny illustration. I could give you a number of other figures. As for the Chinese companies, a huge amount of investments they provide for. This is an absolutely different level of requirement for the companies. This is a different type of requirement for the staff. Today, we do not produce the stuff to the market. And with demand for this stuff is going to emerge, it will turn out that the market of this stuff, the labor market, is not ready at all. And our attempts and efforts to somehow fill the gap to create the School 21 huge project. 3,000 engineers are going to be trained, about 1,000 in Moscow campus are going to graduate on an annual basis. But if we take into account that 7.5 engineers, this is the staff we need per year in Sberbank, so we can understand what it is. Let's take a look at the engineers graduating every year from high schools in Russia in general. And we're talking about the engineers of sufficient quality required by the market. I don't want even to voice these figures. This is the second problem. And we don't have any shift as of today. The third point, we are lagging behind with the strategy. We don't have a clear path how different services should be developed. We see the monopolization by the state of competitive fields. And the ministries are in line. They don't understand what to do, but they're trying to fill the gap. I believe this rule working for the economy in general, but for the digital economy, it is absolute. The competition is developing much faster. Any model, any business model connected with the new technologies or approaches development might be either competitive or non-competitive. And when you create the artificial monopoly, giving the field for the state, in advance you can say that you are creating non-competitive model. Non-competitive model causes non-competitiveness. As of today, not any single state, not any single company can provide the competitiveness of even a small product, even within our company. We're spending many resources on the development of different things. And, we see that we have a lot of companies in our ecosystem. We have a huge number of projects developed. We don't want to spend a lot of money because they are solved by different departments of our company. And
last year, we had an attempt to rethink and to unite our effort, to allocate all the effort in one area. For example, NLP, natural language processing. We have 14 companies or 14 locations where the company develops approaches to speech recognition and so on and so forth. So when we started together these things in one location, it turned out that in different locations we have different approaches developed, and they are very interesting and they compete strongly with each other. And after thinking about it for a long time, we decided to come up with a single platform for reusing the services, but to maintain the competition within our company. And that is adequate. If it is adequate for the company, then it is obviously adequate for the government, for the state. And we should preserve that without having a monopoly on state monopoly on the development of digital ecosystem or the state as a platform. So that has to be avoided. And now a lot of discussions are held about identifying or conforming centers, and there are some projects that are going to kill this competition. So if there are several identifying or certifying centers, it will really kill the competition. We will lose several millions US dollars. The ministries will be happy because they will obtain monopoly on that, but we will kill the development of the technology, because not a single monopoly will work on the development of technologies. It will work simply on preserving its monopoly. The same is true about the single biometric system. Okay, we have created it, but we should not kill the competition of companies within it. We have to preserve alternative because one of the key factors is competitiveness of the product in companies. And what I'm now frightened with is a race of ministries to occupy certain location, certain platform, even when they do not have competences in it. So what they seek for now is just to occupy this place, to get the rights of a single executor, single participant, to be able to stay within that location without letting anyone in. So as for what has derailed or what has gone wrong, I believe that is the most dangerous trend that we are now trapped in. And a very powerful anti-lobbyist resource has to be concentrated in the government that doesn't have to fight large players like us. Because again, we see this fight, but they need to help the weak ones. So they should not kill the strong ones. We are not a monopoly. We are developing our service in a competitive space, and no one is blocking anyone from entering this space. So I believe we need to maintain competition. We need to maintain equality of approaches to all players. But in no way we should fight the strong players, and the attempts to fight those who have attained some success in the market, such companies as us, Yandex or Mail, that is again something that gives an illusion of reaching competitive space. Another thing that I would like to talk about in this part is that we should step over ourselves, so to say, in terms of building a new model of public and private partnership. We should not borrow the experience of the countries that failed to do that, because what we like is to give all the responsibility to the government and then expect the government to bring us something ready. So I believe that that is not a model that we should use, because the government, the state, does not have the necessary resources, does not have the necessary foundation, and we should not have excessive regulation now. And the EU experience shows that last year the EU adopted the great directive of the EU on GDPR that stopped progress on data management and AR in Europe. Europe will now be lagging behind. Don't hurry to regulate. We should not regulate something that we do not understand fully yet, because that will hurt and harm the technologies. What I like more is American and Chinese approaches that try to probe in, but do not hurry with regulation. They use softer methods to come to the understanding of how the regulation model should be structured. And now we have pretty strong and ambitious young people in regulatory positions, and they do not always look back to the consequences of what they are doing. It is great that we have these good young people in authorities, but very often they come from business, and very often they fail to understand the consequences of their actions in business. Because the actions in business and actions in state regulators are two different things in terms of consequences and in terms of decision-making types. So the last thing that I would like to voice, don't hurry with regulation. Do not use regulation unless you understand where the technology will develop. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Graf. You have mentioned a lot of barriers and willingness of different players to occupy their fields, lobbying and regulation. But I would like to change the course of our discussion a little bit. And as for the questions from the audience, the first place is pretty brief. Transparent IT processes are a barrier to corruption. Will they be allowed? So, Mr. Graf, that is a question to you. I understand what Mr. Akimov will answer. He will say we will fight. Well, it is obvious that they will try not to allow them. But that will be again like a pendulum. And in this case, approaches to and lobbyists to approaches of the state as a platform have to have a lot of power. And it is obvious that some people will try to build the closed system, and that is the so-called expert barriers in the market. So as soon as some experts turn up, let it be physicians or banks or whoever else, they try to pose a lot of barriers around their field to have as few foreigners in as possible. Like, for example, lawyers have their bureaus of lawyers and certificates and exams and so on. And that is a well-known factor in economy of creating export barriers at the entry point. And ministries will fight for this field in the same manner. They will substantiate it with the state security, state interests, capabilities of the government to build their own independent policy. But they will definitely fight for obtaining funds to build their own closed system to let nobody in. So it is highly important for people who will be responsible for that function. So now that is Mr. Akimov, to have enough power and authority and absolute support of the president of the country and prime minister of the country, as well as financial levers of power to finance the policies. And if the state as a platform is created, then very little space will be left for corruption. Yesterday, at a meeting with the president, we discussed the creation of a digital platform on claims on law enforcement agencies' statements. And I'm not sure that we need that. We need to create what Maria has mentioned. And if we have transparent processes relayed in the digital with the necessary access of the market to this information, when any decision of any civil servant can be analyzed by expert community and can be placed online, corruption will just become extinct. And I can see no other way out of fighting corruption but transparency. Mr. Akimov, you would like to add something, please? Not only expert assessment of decisions made. Colleagues, we have 100,000 people in the country that calculate pensions. And what is unknown about myself, about my work track, to have a clear, transparent algorithm that would make a decision on which pension rights I have as of today. So that is not the fight for IT budget. I would like to support Mr. Graf, but turn the focus a little bit. So that is not a fight for IT budgets. It is clear that any negotiation of mine with any agency starts with let us build a data center. My favorite sweet data center, because that is an event and action that I like very much for those who order it and for those who build it. And when we talk about harmonized, clear, transparent data architecture, that is something that allows to function in the world where there is a solution of a single algorithm, where it is possible, where no moral assessment is needed, where no subject motives assessment is needed. So in situations where you cannot build an algorithm according to a certain composition. Maria is smiling now because we understand that sometimes, yes, this is needed. And sometimes an algorithm cannot do it. But as for the rest, that is just a question and a matter of system interaction. And understanding is a step further. Again, understanding, I mean, of ministries and agencies, understanding that data disclosure and data inclusion into a single system of data operability and systemity is perceived as a threat. But now we need to make further practical steps. I totally agree with what Mr. Kimov has said. It is clear, yes, that there is a need to build a data center, and there is just a trivial, like, stealing. And they believe that they steal a lot, but they lose a lot. And building huge number of data centers will make us lose a lot. So physically, we do not need them. And that is a question of how many data centers the government needs, whether it needs them at all. I believe we need to discuss that several times. But another element is a huge amount of work in these closed engineering systems and using different components that will be a gigantic economy for the state. We used to be a tech company that did not think about the development of the environment, like libraries, and finally we lost a lot because the same people did different people did the same work, and when it all went to one library, we saw that there were similar IT solutions with similar errors. So that has to be gathered in one engineering environment as well, so that different systems can reuse components that are already made, that are ready, that will cut, both in terms of time and resources, a lot of losses. Thank you very much. And now let us address Maxim Parshin, who is Deputy Minister of Digital Development. Maxim and I discussed our session beforehand, but I would like to ask a totally different question that might be provocative. So your ministry, is it fighting to occupy its field, or are you trying to arrange your work in such a way that all the participants can develop competitive solutions at a competitive base? No, we are building platforms. Platform of digital government is already built, and it is made of 3 components. And Mr. Kimov has mentioned that partly. We have the public services portal, that is the most visited public website in the world, with 1 billion visits last year, 30 million downloads of mobile app of the portal. We have a single system of identification with 80 million accounts, and 52 million of which are proven. And that system of identification is used not only in the government now, but by many players. There is also interdepartmental electronic interaction system with 100 million transactions per day that are secure. And we need to think what that is. That is, I believe, a new quality of the government, because several years ago everything was in paper. There were no transactions, and we are planning to develop these platforms, and that is a task of the near 2-3 years, and we will obtain the first results in the current 2019. And we're going to develop the web portal, but not as a web portal simply, but as a single ecosystem of public services, and the working title will be GOSWeb. Now we have 200,000 public municipal websites and websites of subordinate agencies. All these resources were developed in different times by different people with different talents and ideas, and definitely they do not stand the criticism in their majority, and we need to unite them within one ecosystem, linking them with the service widgets, with a single policy in terms of design and editing and data layout. Yes, we are going to develop ECA and digital profile on the basis of e-service. And we have several profiles with surnames and tax identification number and some other information that the users put in themselves. Mechanism of authority delegation has been implemented already, and also the conciliation mechanism will also be implemented soon when a citizen agrees to provide some data. Half of SMAV traffic is now generated by banks. That is automation. That is information that is automatically requested by banks, and we are going to continue developing that. So why we are doing all that? We are talking about building a service state, and the approach that we have here is as follows. We need to provide services at a qualitatively new level, and inevitably we need to transform all the ministerial systems and work with public data. We have worded 25 so-called super services. They are presented here on the slide, and we are planning to discuss them with Mr. Kimov. We now have spread them around federal ministries and agencies, so 25 super services of live situations. And afterwards, they break down into around 200 lower services of regional and municipal and local levels, and we understand that while transforming these services, we will transform all the ministerial and agencies system. All these services have to be provided proactively, online, without the participation of a civil servant. And we need to pose these tasks. And we are planning to proceed from the user experience, from screen forms on a smartphone.
We're interested in the services of 5-star level. We say yes, we need everything to be proactive, to be online. Everything should be one-click approach. Then the harsh reality may change the situation. All right, 5-star level is not enough, but 4-star is our maximum minimum. And based on that, what should be done right now? Now, from the angle of digital profile development, we have to come down to several things. This is the transformation of the interagency information system itself, and the transformation of the work with the public data, which should be happening under the control and monitoring of single architecture approach. And Mr. Akimov has created such a working group. And in the forthcoming days, we're going to have the first meeting of this working group. Talking about the development of digital economy, there are two questions arising. The first one is a commercial and monetization of the infrastructure created for the e-government. And the second is of putting public data in use. We have created the highway where we see the only public transport. Maybe we need to set the question whether this road should be accessible to all the stakeholders. Yes, separate parts of this highway should be not toll-free, and it's okay. We are discussing different cases from the perspective of possible monetization of the infrastructure itself. We're doing it not for the purpose of compensating and paying back the state investment, but based on the point how there is demand for this infrastructure and how the business can be developed on this infrastructure, not in case when we force the commercial players to use this infrastructure. The commercial utilization of the single system of interagency operation or the authentication identification process. Sometimes we have several passwords to different online shops, to different e-services. We have different requests like that. Everything should be harmonized. We should be defined by the government. It should be non-discriminatory in nature. They should avoid abuse. This is our major path, the further utilization of all these services, the e-government services in terms of the information provision, targeted information provision. This is our path we are developing very actively right now. And in the near future, we're going to put it for the discussion. The second point, which has been mentioned already today, this is the utilization of state data, public data. Right now, the public data is not liquid. Now, it is not an asset. It is a raw material, the ore which is to be extracted, enriched, refined, and turned into an asset, into a value. This is a huge direction within the e-government management system, which is called the development of the national system of data management. These are our priorities in front of us. Getting back to your question. We're not trying to find the field for ourselves. We're creating the platforms which will be used by all those who are interested in, all the stakeholders. Thank you very much for your attention. Now we're out of time. I'd like to ask one single question. Expect a very brief answer. You've said that there are many users. There are many users of e-services website. More and more data is provided. There is a bigger temptation to use this data in a different way. We all know here about the Chinese program of social credit system development. Mr. Akimov was asked a question on this topic at one of the forums. Is our government going to move in this direction, talking about the control over all the transactions and movements of people and the response in terms of the bonus scoring? This is a politics. I'm not going to comment on that. I don't like Chinese experience. I believe that this is not the right way. I believe that the personal data should be used with the consent and agreement of the citizen. Some of the data can be received without the consent or agreement of the citizen. If the citizen doesn't even know that this data is accessible, we need to harmonize that. And the person should clearly understand, seeing their profile, what data is accessible and which is not accessible. And he should have the right to abandon utilization of the data, personal data. May I ask the question? You have started with a statement. You said that the e-government in Russia has been created and finished with the statement that we haven't got down to the operation with the data. How can you say these both things? The platform has been created. This is the reality. The platforms of e-government, the systems, this is the reality. This is a fact. But they are to be developed. And from my perspective, they should be developed as they have been voiced. But systematic data management is not quite systematic. Sorry for this bizarre statement, but this is a direct thing that needs to be done within the national economy. Let's get from data to infrastructure. I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Salem. In Russia, one of the federal projects, National Program for the Digital Economy, is dedicated to the development of infrastructure. How Russia looks like through this perspective compared with other countries.
Here, I was looking, and I think I'm the only one using this, so I'm sorry if you're all going to be having to use this to hear me now. When you look at, I've been listening to my colleagues previously, and when you look at the digital transformation, all the talk has been about data and the online world, while infrastructure is actually probably what we interact with the most. It's the physical world that we live with every day. And in that physical world, you also have to understand that there has to be a digital layer to convert that physical world, how it is today, to become closer to our digital environment. The physical layer, if you think about it, it's like the utilities. We have infrastructure utilities for water, infrastructure utilities for electricity, infrastructure utilities for waste, for sewage. You also have to have infrastructure utility for the internet, because that's the connectivity that converts everything from the physical environment that we have into a digital environment that is cheaper to maintain, more efficient, and provides a much better service for our world today. Currently, in the world, we are facing, in this decade and probably the next decade, two big shifts in our environment. One is the advancement of technology and the digital revolution is much faster than it has ever been before, and the cost of technology is going down significantly. And the second one is the urbanization and the incredible increase of population puts so much pressure on our infrastructure. Just to give you an idea, in the world today, the amount of urbanization happening, people moving into big urban cities and urban environments, requires approximately 10,000 classrooms to be built every day of kids moving into. So there is so much pressure on schools, on hospitals, on roads, on airports, on teachers, on doctors, that we don't have enough in our urban environments to service for the urbanization. Using innovative digital solutions and technologies is the only way we can increase the value and the use of our assets today. Building new environments is definitely a positive thing. Building more infrastructure to service is positive, but we also have to get the maximum output out of the existing infrastructure we have today by the use of digital technologies and innovative ideas. I know that you're running out of time, so I don't want to keep going.
Thank you so much.
If such a question has been touched, of urbanization and the access to the infrastructure, I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Malinovsky. You have the experience of using credit cards to get the access to the digital information without any analog intermediaries. How can it be used for the state governance? Can you share any specific examples? Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for the opportunity to take part in this discussion. Yeah, we are on the other side of the problem. We're talking about the access to data which the state as a platform should provide to the citizens. And I'm going to answer the question on the smart cities, on the access to the infrastructure and to the data. First of all, I'd like to mention that as a global company, we have particular desire to look how the country looks compared with other states, with other participants on the global market. And here, I remember the remark voiced by Maria at the beginning of our panel discussion on the question which the civil servants have during training, whether we are going to catch up or not, how Russia looks like compared with other countries. I'd like to start with a couple of words with the Russian market peculiarities to understand our capabilities in the direction. There is a global competitiveness index developed by the World Economic Forum, and the data for 2018 is the following. Russia has a very big market. The stable indicator here, we have the sixth spot between the Great Britain and Germany on the fifth and seventh spots. And the potential is huge, but the development of the financial system is lagging behind considerably. In 2018, we are on the 86th spot, lagging behind Tunisia. What is more interesting, talking about the utilization of communication ICT adoption level, Russia is on the 25th spot. The figure doesn't sound great, but we are one spot ahead of China and 2 spots ahead of US. This is the statistics by World Economic Forum. According to our data, Russia in 2018 became the country #1 on the tokenized transactions, which are made with the help of the mobile phone. These are all payment transactions. And on the volume of P2P transactions and transfers, we are country #1 in terms of turnover. More than 50% of all the transactions made in Russia are the wireless transactions. Huge figures talking about the huge appetite for the innovations and technologies which exist in the society, and the society is ready for these technologies. Talking about the answer to the question about the credit cards asked by Alexei, the bank card phrase is a kind of set phrase in a figure of speech, which says that how we have used to code. We're talking about the technologies which allow to share data either for the bank transactions implementation or for the access to any other information which is required. That's why MasterCard is not a card company. This is a high-tech company, actually, talking about the technologies. We have these solutions which allow us to use the bank payment technologies everybody has got used to, which are creditworthy to provide access to the data where the state as a platform would like to provide access to. Here, I totally agree with Mr. Graf with the competitive field. We're one of the companies which allow one of the competitive solutions which would enable the access to this data. We are running out of time. I would like to be brief. You know that on every card there is a chip which can be used as a payment application and non-financial application. And our task is to provide for the opportunity to identify or provide the authenticity for the citizens to get the access to the data which are accessible and provided by the state or the state authorized operator. So we're talking about the solution provided by the data to the urban infrastructure which exist in different republics. Together with Sberbank, we provided for new project in Tatarstan region, which was launched 2016, was quite successful. And the point is that with the help of the bank payment technologies, those algorithms that we have got used to, which are quite trustful, which are quite simple, we identify the citizen, and then the operator of the system, the state, or in Tatarstan region, this is state authorized operator, provide the access to the data starting from the identificator ID for the pensioner, for the student, to the medical record on the discount. So this card can be a payment tool. And in fact, I started with the statement that the payment card is a idiom, is a figure of speech. Why did we do that with the bank card? It allows us to use the infrastructure which exists right now and which operates right now. You don't need to invest in something absolutely new. But along with that, we do understand that the world is moving forward to the Internet of Things. And in MasterCard, believe that Internet of Things is going to be the Internet of authentication. Every device or gadget with the payment functionality will have the capability to identify the person. And if you move forward, our global study demonstrates that talking about the necessity to authenticity of the person, there are specific rules, but the capability used to many channel authentication. When the person uses his identification and authentication process, which is comfortable for him, which is integrated in the single system of smart cities, we have a special platform which is called City Possible. This is a digital platform which we are ready to share, to discard, which was launched in 2018. This is a new solution. But nevertheless, if we get back to the experience of Tatarstan region, we can say that with the help of this special citizen card, the time for identification went down sevenfold. This is a huge breakthrough, 5 times fold when you apply for medical services. And all the information which is on the card of the citizens can be added by the transaction information, record. We have brilliant solutions which we launch in New York, Singapore. When the information on transactions is provided to retailers or to the city municipality and allows them to understand which cities are popular to open the cafes, restaurants, outlets. And the city municipality can understand where the traffic is low and which spots should be invested in order to provide for the compatible capacity. We have a huge, in Russia we have more than 50 transport projects launched as of today. And it is very important to talk about the success factors of such solutions. There is a political will. We need to have a sponsor for them to be interested in the implementation of the solution. If we're talking about the Tatarstan region, the solution was discussed with the President of the Republic, Mr. Minikhanov, with the Vice Prime Minister was the head of the working group. And in this respect, we may talk about a huge number of other things. Since the time is out, I'd like to mention the following things. It's very important to have the competitiveness on the market, and for the stakeholders in place have capability to offer different solutions. If we're talking about the access to the services, we're talking about the Internet of Things. There is a good quote of our head, Ajahn Banga, that the Internet of Things is impossible without the full access to the Internet. So the fight against digital exclusion and digital divide, this is the task for all of us. We need to work in this respect. If you feel necessity, please invite us to work together. Thank you very much for your input.
And now I would like to give the floor to Sava Shipov, Deputy Minister of Economic Development of the Russian Federation. One of the most important ways of development of science and technology is regulatory sandboxes in many countries. What about the Russian variant of that? Thank you very much, and good morning, dear colleagues. Mr. Graf has mentioned that regulation should not be very fast and something that has not been well thought over, because very often business can be regulated in such a way that it cannot work at all. Therefore, the Ministry of Economic Development has a pretty difficult task. On the one hand, we have digital economy program with a task to adopt over 50 laws, 80 laws that are connected with regulation of these things. But on the other hand, we understand that the price of the error will be very hard. So the right approach will be if a business generates the changes. So if the business has a chance to bring this home to the government and we can solve the issue, that would be great. On the other hand, Alexei has correctly mentioned a sandbox is the correct tool that, on the one hand, enables to avoid such large errors that would for example, impact the state security. And on the other hand, it enables us to understand whether the solution is effective or not. If it is, then we can roll it out to the whole country. As for what has been done as of now, we have come up with a draft law on regulatory sandboxes. It was published several days ago on the website, and now we start public hearings, public discussions. So what it should solve, where the digital experiment should be run. It should be run in relation to digital technologies, everything connected with the blockchain, big data, artificial intelligence, cyber-physical systems. But we do not close this list. And other technologies and other relations can be subject to that experiment. And these technologies can be applied in various spheres, and it is the spheres where they will be applied this experiment can run. If it is agriculture, then we will create a sandbox for agriculture. If it is healthcare, then it will be for healthcare. And from that viewpoint, one of the major tasks is for that solution to be like throughput, so that we should not waste years on that, and it should be pretty operatively made. But there is another question. On the other hand, what about risks, such as security? And therefore, there has to be exceptions from the bylaw, like the defense sphere, the security sphere, that should remain intact. And there are also risks in terms of everyday activity. And I will give you an example with Skolkovo. You know that we have had experiments with the driverless cars in Skolkovo, and there was an issue because people living there said, we do not want that. We do not want to run this risk because we do not know where this robot will drive whom. And then there is a question, how we can run an experiment if any experiment is connected with the risks? Are we ready to understand and embrace the concept that any experiment will not run without risks, and no sandboxes will be possible without risks? But there has to be a clear-cut risk management system. There has to be a risk mitigation system. And reasonable risks should be grounded. And the last but very important element that deals with these sandboxes is a question whether that would be a tool of competitive struggle and monopolization. We believe that that is critical, and the draft law implies today sandboxes creation for specific organizations that are within certain parameters, and some organizations that lead in a certain sphere, or for several players. So there can be different options, but we believe that the mechanism of entering this experiment should be equal for all, and everyone suiting the conditions of this experiment should be able to take part in it. I would like to call upon all interested people to familiarize yourself with the draft law. Feedback is really critical for us now, so thank you very much. Thank you. We have almost run out of time, but as I promised, we will try to answer the questions that we received from the audience. So far, we have received only one answer, and we have received dozens of questions. I'm afraid that many of them are really very interesting, but demand a totally separate, deep discussion. But I cannot but ask question number 2 in terms of popularity. I have asked the first one, and the second one is about motivation of civil servants to transition to digital level, and many people do not even like to be trained for ordinary software. Mr. Akimov, you have mentioned that that is one of the main tasks of yours. Well, that is a traditionally difficult question. We have looked at many countries of the world and how they solve this issue. To compete with the commercial segment, mostly in such a segment as IT, it is pretty difficult everywhere. I might be in some privileged position, but I have never met demotivated people that are functionally incapable not only to be civil servants, but to live in the modern world. I mean, those who would not use some basic applications. But another question is about experts and upgrading their basic skills and the taste for working with data. And we have a large separate dialogue for that with Ministry of Labor and the administration of the government that is in charge of the civil service system. And it is hard to say so far, but motivation will definitely be used. But that is a hard question, I will reiterate. But talking about a pretty cutting-edge experience of Singapore, and I asked a question on purpose, there is almost a quarter of a gap between the pay of experts in the market, and they try to maintain it, though it is falling by 60% sometimes, but it is hard to maintain this gap of 2/3 of pay. And the problem with the staff deficit is characteristic not only to Russia. And the question to Maria, as head of Chief Digital Transformation Officer program, could you word the main competences of Chief Digital Transformation Officer? That is easy. You need an ordinary intelligence and open-mindedness. And you have to be able to perceive new things and to explain it, to inspire your team, and to inspire emotional intelligence in the team. And you have to understand data management. So you need to learn to understand how you can change everything around yourself. And you can do it if you start approaching data differently, without basing yourself on myths, but understanding how everything is born and how you can have objective decision-making into your processes. And could you raise your hands, those who are graduates of our program, because I can see some graduates, and those who have taught at the program and have assisted, helped, somehow participated in the report preparation. I would like to thank all of you very much. And Maxim Viktorovich gave 2 or 3 lectures and spent some evenings with us there. So I would like to express our immense gratitude to all of you, because it has been and will be a story that only together with the students who are managers and leaders of different levels, only together, I believe, we would be able to make a shift and avoid a situation when people do not use Excel or email. Because 4 people at our course needed to have messengers installed. I'm sorry to say that, but still, after the course, at least they started using messengers. But I hope that next year, graduates of our program will share success that they will make, and we will listen to them. Thank you very much. I have made a lot of notes, and I will voice just some of them that I believe can be valuable takeaways. Maria had a pretty detailed presentation, but still we need to make the strategy clearer and as well as make the answer to the question what clearer to everyone. We also need to streamline the key integration resources on the system of data management, motivation, creation of competitive environment to settle all that. We should not go too much into regulation, but we should go through some experiments, sandboxes, to have a look at what is going to happen. And the key question that Mr. Graf has mentioned is also who will do that and how to train the people, starting with high school and special programs. And I believe that no one will doubt that that topic is extremely significant and critical for the country and for all of us. And I hope that we will actively move forward in developing the state as a platform. I would like to thank all the participants, all the key panelists, the speakers, and everybody who has come to this discussion this morning. Thank you very much and have a good day. Bye-bye.